everyone, and it's great to be here again at St. A's. I want to thank all of you for traveling through the weather to be here. It's a great turnout. It says an awful lot about our guest speaker. I'd like to thank also Neil Levesque, who's in the back, who does a great job here at the Institute of Politics. And we'll be having some speakers very shortly at the Institute, and Neil does an outstanding job, to say the least. Speaking of also thank yous, BAE Systems here, a great neighbor here in the community in New Hampshire. Any worthy cause, usually see BAE Systems as one of the premier sponsors. They are really engaged in the community, and I think it reflects all the way down to their employees, that they just don't make a living here, but they contribute to the community. And my good friend and our good friend Tom Bishop is here. Didn't recognize him at first. He got a little distinguished look about him. He looks very professorial, and you look very intelligent, Tom. I mean, you look very nice. But I just want to thank BAE again, stepping up to the plate and being our sponsor here this morning. New England Council's off to a fast start. Last year we did almost 60 events throughout all 6 New England states and in Washington, with every member of Congress, every senator, every governor, members of Congress beyond New England down in Washington, D.C. And we're on par to probably exceed that this year. Just in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be with Senator Jack Reed in Rhode Island, and Congressman Gabe Amo, Rhode Island, and Senator Angus King in Maine. We'll be back here on March 19th with Senator Maggie Hassan, and before you know it, we're going to be in Washington for our Washington Leaders Conference, and that will be opening up in registration next week. It's a great 2 days, an informative and enlightening opportunity to hear people speak, from members of Congress, members of the Senate, media people. It's just a great day of getting a real update of what is going on in Washington. In the years past, we've had 250, 275 people from all 6 New England states come down, and it's just a great event, to say the least. That will be held on May 14th and 15th. But again, anyone that's been there, it's been very productive and informative, to say the least. And you can get more information on our website, newenglandcouncil.com. Today, we're delighted to welcome back someone that's no stranger to the New England Council, and that is Congressman Chris Pappas. As many of you know, he's now serving his 4th term. I do remember when he was first elected. Now it's the 4th term. And,
I remember that too.
Yeah, man, oh man. I was a young man then, but he represents, as you know, the 1st Congressional District here. And in the 19th Congress, the new Congress, he is now on some very important committees. The Small Business Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, and Transportation and Infrastructure. They're not easy assignments, but it also says how he is viewed and thought of by his colleagues. And obviously, he has made a major contribution already in those committees. So he's been an incredible advocate. I think many of you already know that, but he's been an incredible advocate, not just for his district, but for New England. And we're grateful he could join us today and to give us a little update. What's going on out there, and your thoughts on some of the key issues that are affecting our nation. So let's give a warm welcome to our distinguished guest, the Congressman from the 1st Congressional District here in New Hampshire, the Honorable Chris Pappas. All right. Now, the hardball questions.
Okay.
Let me just begin by saying that the Congressman has been voted the most bipartisan Democrat in Congress.
A few applause.
That was given to him by the Lugar Center at Georgetown University. And Senator Lugar was from Indiana, and they really try to find ways of having people work together. But what a distinction to have in today's environment, the most bipartisan. So let's start with the last 24 hours of what's happened in Washington with the president's decision to freeze all all grants that have been appropriated by you and your colleagues in Congress. I'm sure your phone has been ringing off the hook, and your emails have been inundated, as our emails and calls from hospitals and community health centers and higher ed people and housing and disabled organizations and so many other nonprofits are saying, what are we going to do? They're freezing our grants that we can't even make payroll. So your thoughts on what is happening, and more importantly, what can you and some of your colleagues do about it?
Well, good morning, everyone. And Jim, thanks for the opportunity to be back with the New England Council. We appreciate this series. And before we know it, we'll be doing politics and eggs in this room, right, in advance of the next New Hampshire primary. But it's great to be with you all. And, you know, we're at a moment where every day is a week or a month in terms of the news cycle and our politics. I came back from D.C. last Friday, and I thought, boy, when was that inauguration? That feels like years ago, and it was on Monday of that same week. And so I think part of this is a strategy by the incoming administration to really flood the zone. And they're moving at breakneck speed in a variety of different areas. I think there are a lot of ways that you could kind of try to get at the intentions of what they're doing with this order around freezing funding. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and frankly, I think it violates the power of the purse that rests with Congress. We're talking about appropriations bills that have been passed on a bipartisan basis, funding established. These aren't new programs. These were around largely during the last Trump administration, are funds that go to organizations like Meals on Wheels, support our public safety community. Talking with the fire department in Manchester yesterday, they're worried about a grant that's been frozen that would allow them to hire new firefighters in the city of Manchester, domestic violence. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's incredibly far-reaching. There was a footnote about exempting Medicare and Social Security. The White House has come out and tried to sort of backtrack and say that this does not affect programs that where people are receiving direct assistance. But I think it's incredibly unclear. We have more questions than answers at this point in time, and we're trying to help people get to the truth and to work with our colleagues to push back. There was an injunction yesterday by a federal judge that puts a pause on this, at least for a few days, while the case can be heard. But again, I think this is about separation of powers. It's about the ability of our democracy and our institutions to have integrity. And I do hope that there's a strong bipartisan response in Congress to this. You heard some good comments from Susan Collins, who's chair of the Appropriations Committee on the Senate side, to that effect. But we should all be working together. We've got so many challenges on the table, including a fiscal cliff coming up in mid-March, where if we don't act, the government shuts down. And so this early start from the administration doesn't give us a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to be moving in the right direction. I always think if you can get folks on the Appropriations Committee, the House and Senate leadership from the four corners, get them in a room, they can hash out a deal. But I think as we have seen during the first term of this president, you know, things can intervene. We had a deal at the end of the last calendar year on government funding that got blown up because of posts on Twitter. And that's no way to run a government. Doesn't provide the kind of predictability that agencies that are doing good work in our communities that need to deliver for constituents deserve. And we're going to try to advocate for that as best we can in this really uncertain time.
You know, President Trump issued dozens of executive orders in the last couple of days, ranging from workforce, immigration, climate change. Obviously, many of them you would disagree with, but would there be any opportunity there for you to work with him and your Republican colleagues?
Well, I think if we're talking about the banner of government efficiency, that should be an area where we can get folks working together and be putting good ideas on the table. We've got legislation about implementing GAO recommendations around waste, fraud, and abuse. Doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, though, when some of the individuals that are tasked with identifying that waste, fraud, and abuse have been let go, the inspectors general of a number of different departments, including individuals that I work closely with. I think of the inspector general at VA, Mike Missel. Terrific guy. He has been incredibly informative for our committee to make things more efficient for veterans. but unfortunately, the administration's trying to push them out. So, just getting away from the editorializing for a second, I think government efficiency and finding savings should be an area where both parties should come to the table with good ideas. I know I am ready to do that as a member of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. So I guess I will try to stay optimistic on that front.
The White House is expected to announce a series of tariffs this weekend that will have a tremendous impact on New England, our economy, cost of living, and in particular a 25% tariff on goods coming from Canada, our largest trading partner. Canada's already indicated they will issue a tariff on energy and lumber that we need for housing. There are estimates that if the tariff goes through, electricity bills will double because of the shortage that will be occurring here. Your thoughts on this tariff, whether the administration is actually going to go through with it, or is it just noise, or are they serious about doing this? And what can you do with your colleagues to prevent that from happening?
Sure. It's an important question. I hear it a lot from the business community in New Hampshire. Obviously, we've got strong trading relationships north of the border and with partners in Mexico and other parts of the world that are threatened by the tariff policy of the new administration. There's a place for tariffs when you are thoughtful, when you use them as a scalpel as opposed to a sledgehammer, when we want to protect industries, when we're thinking about national security. So I wouldn't say blanket, we shouldn't be pursuing tariffs in any realm. But when you're talking about across-the-board tariffs, 25% against products coming in from our closest ally, Canada, it's incredibly disruptive for business. It raised costs for consumers. And as coming out of the election, where we all felt the focus should be, we've got this economy that has good numbers, positive numbers around employment, around economic growth, but yet most people aren't feeling it because of the high cost of living. We have to focus on costs around the cost of housing, of childcare, of those day-to-day products that people pick up at the grocery store. This is a sales tax that is going to increase prices. If you think about tariffs on goods coming in from Mexico, half of our produce comes from Mexico. And so that's a direct increase that people are going to experience at the grocery store. I was talking with a business owner that procures equipment from Canada to run his business, and he said he's got some orders in the pipeline. If this tariff goes into place, it's literally hundreds of thousands of dollars more that he owes on the same products that are coming in that he needs to run his business right here in New Hampshire, which is an important job creator. So it has an impact on our economy, on the bottom lines of our businesses and households. I would urge caution. I hope there's an opportunity for Congress to weigh in. But again, a president has pretty broad latitude in this regard because of the way the law's been written.
There seems to be momentum in Congress, in particular from your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, to address the permitting reform. And it's been gaining traction. And I know that you are very familiar with energy challenges here in New England. Would this be an opportunity for you to be working with them on permitting reform and how it could benefit our region?
Yes, and I think we all need to recognize that it takes way too long to bring a project to fruition. Whether you're talking about an infrastructure project, like building a new road or a rail line, or a transmission project, we need to find ways to shorten that time frame. Because it's preventing work from being done and it's leaving economic potential on the table. So when you think about some of the bills that we've considered and passed on a bipartisan basis, including the CHIPS and Science Act, bipartisan infrastructure law, the renewable energy provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, we really need to take that next step with permitting reform. I believe it can be done on a bipartisan basis and in a way that doesn't shortchange the ability to have public input and to be looking out and be good stewards of our natural environment. I think we can have that sort of win-win. if we're willing to open that conversation up. So there's a great deal of interest in it. We've come close with some bipartisan deals over the last couple of years in Washington, but I think now is an important time to do it.
Do you think that Congress is going to go back to what you just said, the infrastructure bill, the science bill, the CHIPS bill, try to repeal it?
Well, you've probably heard that there's an effort with the majority in the House and Senate to push a reconciliation process that's looking to extend tax cuts and to even lower the corporate rate, apparently now from 21 to 15 is their goal. And they want to do it in a deficit-neutral way, unlike the 2017 tax cut law that they passed. That's going to be incredibly difficult if you don't find savings in some of those areas where we felt we were making smart investments for the future around renewable energy, around infrastructure. So that is an area that we're going to be watching, but that legislation is being drafted right now. We expect to see a budget resolution come up in the next few weeks that should give us a better idea of where those funds might be pulled from to go to tax cuts, to go to border security, and some other priorities that they have.
But there really isn't much in the budget that you can really cut, is there? When you look at the top items that generate the most revenue, you get Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, and now what we pay on the debt is equal to what we spend on Department of Defense. What's left that you can cut? Very little, I would think. So.
Well, we are, and we have to recognize, on an unsustainable trajectory with respect to debt and deficit. And we've got to grapple with it, not 5 or 10 years from now, not when Social Security isn't going to be able to pay out benefits in the 2030s. We should be having that tough conversation today. So I believe we can find savings, but it shouldn't be on the backs of vital programs that people have paid into, that people depend on. And we shouldn't be doing it in a way that is trying to finance and set up the next step of expanding tax breaks for people who don't need it right now. We should have some targeted tax cuts and extend those tax breaks for individuals earning less than $400,000 a year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But going beyond that is, I believe, fiscally irresponsible and is making the problem worse. So I hope we can have some space for these bipartisan conversations around taxes, around debt and deficit. I think that's more likely if this one-party effort at reconciliation falls apart, and then all of a sudden it turns into a conversation around needing votes from the other side. I certainly will be ready to have those conversations. I hope some of my other colleagues in our caucus are too.
I mean, one of the major pieces of legislation that the President and Congress wants to achieve this year is to extend the 2017 tax cut. And you just mentioned about reducing the capital gain, not the corporate tax down to 15%. There are some people that would like to see it even lower, believe it or not. They want to compete with countries like Ireland where it's 12.5%. To do that, though, to extend all of those taxes, economists indicate it could be a $5 trillion added to the debt. We're at $36 trillion already. So how do you balance that?
Well, there's no balance when you issue a $5 trillion tax cut. There's simply no way to get at that, especially over the 10-year period that a reconciliation bill covers. And so that's going to be part of, I think, the pushback against what we see coming out. And we'll wait to see the details. Mm-hmm. But again, we should be protecting the needs of our Main Street businesses, working families right now at a time where we know costs are far too high. But we don't need a massive decrease in the corporate tax rate to that extent. We just can't afford it as a country. We should be working to find savings, but the notion that there are trillions of dollars in savings in non-defense discretionary spending, right. it just doesn't pan out.
Right. You know, the shortage of affordable housing has emerged as a top priority of all of the members of the New England delegation in recent years. So it's, needless to say, it's challenging to attract and retain talent. You must hear it from the business community as well. You know, the housing prices in New Hampshire have increased significantly over the past 5 years. And they have gone up. In 2019, the average price is $285,000. Today, the average price as of December 2024 is $493,000. So are there any policies at the federal level that you could help address some of these prices that just seem to keep going up and up and up?
Yeah. No, we all know the picture in New Hampshire where we're tens of thousands of units short of where we need to be just to meet the needs of our economy. And, we benefit from being a desirable place for people to want to relocate, for people to raise a family. But especially in these post-pandemic years, we have seen a surge in housing prices and a decrease in the stock of affordable housing in our state. And so to address this is a top challenge. And I think the fact that you're hearing this from federal officials down to state and local officials in New Hampshire, conversation's really robust. That's the first step in beginning to address it. And this is one issue where we need to see a whole of government approach. We can't expect to just issue legislation from Washington or even carve out a new tax credit and just expect to see this development happen. It can only happen if we have communities that are being creative, that are reimagining what development looks like. It'll only happen if we have state partners that, like through New Hampshire Housing, that are working with the private sector to get these dollars out and to get this development moving. We have seen some important progress, including the state utilizing federal funds for development. Communities are sharing best practices. There are opportunities to reevaluate zoning. We should incentivize all that activity from the federal level. There was a bill last year to expand the low-income housing tax credit, which is one of the primary vehicles that incentivizes true workforce housing. Unfortunately, it fell by the wayside in the Senate, but that could be another provision that gets picked up in a tax bill that would really help us expand our opportunities to develop more affordable housing. So it's the biggest issue, and I think the top thing that I hear all across New Hampshire, it has connections to workforce development, to higher education, to healthcare, to how we do everything in this state. And so it's just a core centerpiece issue where folks have to be working together. And the good news is on housing, as opposed to maybe some of the other issues of the day, I think less likely to politicize this issue than other things. And so that bodes well for the ability of the governor and legislature to work together, and I think Democrats and Republicans to find some common sense solutions in Washington that can help.
And to build housing, whether it's affordable housing, commercial housing, we need lumber. And again, our neighbor to the north, that's where we get all our lumber. And if we put the tariff on them, they'll be putting the tariff on lumber coming into here, and it's going to make the cost prohibitive for an awful lot of builders to build. So hopefully they'll come to their senses on the tariff and how it's going to impact. You have a new colleague here in New Hampshire in the 2nd Congressional District here with Maggie Goodlander. Are there any pieces of legislation that you are already working together on?
Have you had her in yet?
No.
Okay.
I hope to.
That's good. That's good. You'll be pleasantly surprised by just her depth of knowledge as a new member of Congress. I think she's incredibly focused. She's balanced. She comes from a great New Hampshire family. And so I'm really enjoying getting to know her and to work with her. She actually, you mentioned in my opening that I was on the Small Business Committee, but I'm not on that committee this Congress. She picked up that assignment, though. And so I think that's one area where we'll find some early ways to work together on legislation that I had been carrying on that committee. And obviously small businesses are just at the core of how our economy functions here in New Hampshire. We both have that background in our families, and she's just going to be a terrific colleague to work with. I think she also, comes from a background where she's served at different levels of government. She's clerked for the Supreme Court. I think she, more than most, understands the moment in terms of pressures on our Constitution and our democracy, and a willingness to stand up and to say and do what's right. And so I appreciate the integrity that I think she's displayed, and just how that's so needed in Congress at this moment. We need more people in the House that are willing to put country above party, are willing to do the right thing when we're called to, always thinking about our oath of office. And I think this is a time that's well suited for her leadership. So I'm really excited to to be getting down to business with her.
You know, one of the big issues that the president ran on, and it seems to be the big issue with Congress right now, is immigration. This past session, there was a bill that was passed by the House and the Senate, signed into law, and it would require ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to detain or deport any illegal immigrant who commits crimes of, I don't know, larceny, theft, and shoplifting. 46 members of the Democratic side voted for the bill. You are one. Your colleague, Maggie, I think would support it as well. The two United States senators here supported the piece of legislation. I think it passed, I think it was like 84, which is extraordinary. 84 senators voted for the bill. And as I said, 46 Democrats also voted for the bill. The bill is basically, I think it's named after Laken Riley, who was a nursing student in Georgia, and she was raped and killed by a illegal immigrant from Venezuela while she was out jogging. And when I saw the vote, I said to myself, is that a sign that maybe immigration, bipartisan, will finally pass this 119th Congress?
Immigration has always been a bipartisan issue, and I think that piece of legislation is in response to a horrific killing of an individual and a signal that we should make sure that we're protecting public safety in this country, and individuals that have been committing crimes, are charged with crimes. There should be a level of scrutiny there to prevent an incident like that from happening again in the future. But we've got to be moving in the direction of having a legal system of immigration that works for our country, that meets the needs of our communities and businesses. What we have right now, which is thousands of people trying to cross into our nation each and every day. Also, on the other side, we've got businesses that can't hire people. We have the toughest labor market we've had in a generation. There's a way to address both of those problems and to match them up. And it's some smart investments in border security, as we had in the bipartisan bill that was proposed in the Senate last year. New technology, Customs and Border Patrol would be able to hire more agents. We would get more judges to help move through the asylum process quicker. And on the other side, modernizing our immigration laws so that there's more capacity in some of these programs and an ability for people to come here and to work hard and seek their American dream. That's part of the foundation of our country. And this isn't a moment where we can turn our back on that. Immigration is such an essential part of our future. So we've got to not just have the conversation around dollars and cents with respect to border security. That is important, but we have to move to the conversation, which I think is totally bipartisan, about how we give dreamers legal status in our country. We provide some greater capacity for businesses to get seasonal workers here to help them meet the needs of their customers, and that we have channels that are much more adequate to meet the demands of our economy and where we need to go as a country. There's, I think, great will to do that. The question is if we're able to have that next conversation beyond just the investments in border security. That's just one piece.
Mm-hmm. You know, the Social Security is a big issue with an awful lot of people. And the reason why it's a big issue is they're hearing more and more that if Congress does nothing to address Social Security, in 10 years, the benefits will be reduced to 73% of what they're getting right now. Because when Social Security was established in 1935, the ratio was 160 to every retiree, and today it's 2.5 workers for each retiree. The revenue is not there. Do you think there's any will? I know that your colleague John Larson from Hartford was just reappointed the subcommittee chair on Social Security in the Ways and Means Committee, but is there any will to address that ticking time bomb that if we don't, an awful lot of people in 10 years are going to wake up saying, oh my God, I have less benefits today because they did not act.
Well, there's, I think, tremendous interest in this, and I think my friends from AARP that are here in the room, they always are well represented at this event. And a good reminder about how essential this program is. Hundreds of thousands of seniors and individuals in New Hampshire that are subsisting off their Social Security. It's an earned benefit, and we should come together to work to shore it up. It's been done on a bipartisan basis in the past. Again, this is not an issue that we should wait until 2034 or whatever the date of expiration happens to be. We should be having those conversations now. I hope there's an opportunity, and we'll continue to ask the Speaker to have a bipartisan commission that can begin to meet and help us put good ideas on the table that will identify how we make up that shortfall. One of the areas that we just talked about, immigration, we do need more workers in this country. That can help us actually extend the life of Social Security by having legal immigration and more people working. It increases productivity and the number of people paying into the system, which is a good thing. But I think we need to consider the fact that there's a cap on taxable earnings. That's at a certain level. Mr. Larson will tell you can raise that cap to a certain degree and pay out greater benefits to low-income seniors and to extend the solvency of the program well into the future. And I think that's something that needs to be on the table as we consider how we protect it for the future.
You know, one issue that seems to have been put on the back burner is Ukraine. Is this the end of Congress supporting military aid to Ukraine? There seems to be a lot of opposition on the Republican side to give any further assistance. What are you hearing from your colleagues and how this is going to be addressed?
Well, I think there's not any more opposition than there had been, say, when we approved the last round of funding in the spring, where we had more than 300 House members vote in favor of that security legislation to provide additional direct support to Ukraine that continues to fight for their lives and defend their nation. I hope there's an opportunity for them to continue to make progress and to win their independence and a peace. And the United States is an important partner in that. We don't do it alone, and we can continue to lean on NATO allies and other partners to be part of that effort. But I do think the fact that there's been a change in administration will set a new tone. And I think it's less likely we see funding for security assistance come through the Congress as a result of the president's pretty well-known position on this. It's harder to see Mike Johnson bringing a bill to the floor as he did last time under pressure from members of his own caucus. I think Donald Trump holds a lot more sway than the average member who might still have that position in support of solidarity with Ukraine, but it's less likely to see a clear path forward for security assistance. So we will see how this develops. The Biden administration cleared the decks at the end of the year to get all the possible help they could out the door. And I think it's a time to ensure that our European allies continue to find ways to step up.
And then my final question is 2028 will be coming here before you know it. In fact, they'll be electing a new chair of the Democratic National Committee in the next couple of weeks. Your thoughts on whether New Hampshire is going to remain first? I mean, we just got bumped out on the 24, but your thoughts on whether we're going to make a major effort and what you're hearing from your colleagues, maybe the candidates themselves that are running for the DNC, on making New Hampshire first in the nation.
Yeah. The fact is, we're still standing. We're still here. And we're just going to keep moving forward. And that's the best, I think, opportunity we have to make sure that New Hampshire's in its rightful place on both parties' calendars. And so that means inviting folks to come to New Hampshire who might be thinking about running for president. In the elections last year, we saw notable leaders on both sides of the aisle, especially on the Democratic side, showing up in New Hampshire, people who might be considered as natural candidates to run for president. As long as those folks keep showing up, as long as we keep having conversations like this with people who might be seeking this office, that creates a lot of momentum behind New Hampshire. Fact is, you're not going to have an incumbent administration trying to put its thumb on the scale as you did the last time, which sidelined New Hampshire at the DNC. We know we still went ahead. People still turned out in record numbers. And I think that speaks volumes about the kind of political culture we have in New Hampshire. This is enduring. It's baked into who we are in the Granite State. Doesn't mean we choose for everyone else, but it helps set the national tone. It helps set the parameters of the debate. It brings these national figures down to our level. And I think especially after what transpired on the Democratic side, where you had a new candidate at the convention who was nominated, I think that just means that New Hampshire is more pivotal than ever. And I think those who would make the argument against New Hampshire have lost a lot of standing as a result of how politics have played out over the last year.
We have time for a couple of questions. If you have a question, then just identify yourself. Do we have a mic at all? Maybe no. Do we? If we don't, you're a shouter. Yeah.
I'm Rob Warner, State Director here in New Hampshire of Liquor Conservation Voters. I'm really interested in your view of, frankly, the psychology of a wide swath of your members who seem completely willing to give up their authority as a member of Congress in this situation in which we find ourselves. I mean, the House is where appropriations start. It is their role. It's your role. Why are people so willing to say, do whatever you want? I'm a member of Congress. I'm not representing my people or even my constitutional role.
Any other softball questions?
That would require a lot of, I don't know. You know, I was sitting at the inauguration, and which was just a week ago Monday, and a Republican colleague was sitting in front of me and turned around and said, I'm so glad you're here. I'm like, well, why wouldn't I be here? And there was a good showing of folks on both sides of the aisle who were there. And he said, I don't really agree with much of what he said in his speech. I'm like, well, you could say something about that on those areas where you don't agree, because we all have a responsibility to do that. That's how our system functions. We truly need co-equal branches of government. The legislative branch is the Article I branch of government, was named first by our founders. And I think for a reason, they distrusted a concentration of power in the executive. And we've got to find ways to stand up, not just for our political beliefs, but for checks and balances in institutions. So I will continue to encourage my colleagues to do that wherever possible. I have a hard time seeing if the shoe were on the other foot, sort of the giveaway of and the ceding of authority in the way that we have seen it. We just have to appeal to their better angels and continue to make the argument publicly and privately.
Other questions? Our friends from AARP. There's the mic.
Thank you for taking this. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Thank you for taking my question. So, as you know, AARP believes that conversations about how to ensure that Social Security programs is financially strong and provides meaningful benefits. We think that debate should happen in public rather than through something like an entitlement commission that would make decisions behind an entitlement commission that makes a decision behind closed doors. So what are you hearing about the possibility of something like that happening?
Well, I think we need deliberation. And you're right, this can't be just a white paper that's conjured up, away from the public view. This has to be with public engagement, and I think that's what the legislative arena should always be about. So I mentioned a commission before. I think that has been done in the past, but that should be done in the same way. You would have public committee hearings with input along the way where you can hear from experts. And so that's the kind of process that I was envisioning. But I certainly think that organizations like yours have such a powerful voice, given your membership. We just can't count on Washington to arrive at the right answers at the right time. It really is both an inside and an outside game. And we do need mobilization of folks around the country that will continue to show up and raise this issue and demonstrate the concern that's out there. You all need to be looped in every step of the way through that process. So it's my commitment, but we'll keep talking.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Mark?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Congressman. And Jim, thank you for what New England Council does. BAE Systems, thanks for this very much. My life is manufacturing. I've got several hundred clients, and Congressman Pappas shows up for every event over the last few years. He listens and he understands the issue. And in manufacturing, something struck me in 2019. There were as many people under the age of 45 as over the age of 45. So those folks that are at BAE buying stuff behave very differently than old guys like me that go to trade shows and like to talk. I love these kind of conversations. But I don't see the young people sort of doing that. So my question is, when I think about what's happening right now, like the frustration, a lot of younger folks that I know, why couldn't they tell us who was running those drones a few weeks ago? People want information faster, quicker. We're in the age of AI. This is sort of what I think is happening. And I think Congress really has to figure out a way to communicate in bit and chunks to really articulate what it is. Now, some things are very complicated, and we need these kind of conversations. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, because you're a younger person sitting in Congress with a lot of much older folks that may think differently. And I'm just wondering what your insight is. Like, how do we solve this? Because there's some really bad things that are happening without the conversation. And just as a backdrop, I think about New Hampshire and how it's very split, but they get along and they get stuff done. And it's a really wonderful way to do that. So those are just sort of thoughts that I'm in my mind. I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is showing up and having an invitation for folks of all generations to be a part of the conversation. And so that's part of what we try to do on the New Hampshire side, is to get out anywhere and everywhere and hear from people from diverse backgrounds. And, I do think that obviously young people consume information and media in a different way than maybe your generation or my generation does. And so we have to meet people where they are. And that is, I think, an ongoing challenge for us, for Congress as an institution, which has a very traditional way of going about business and communicating to find ways to get at those folks. For us, it's kind of boots on the ground, community by community here in New Hampshire, showing up in spaces where we can find people, from diverse backgrounds. So that's one of the ways we go about engaging. But I think it's always a challenge to make sure that next generation is represented. As you think about boardrooms in New Hampshire, workplaces, public spaces, including, cities and towns in terms of their local government, who serves on certain commissions. We're always looking for those, sort of young voices to be that next wave of folks who are stepping up. And so, I think we all have to think about ways to offer those invitations to make sure that young people feel at home in the conversation and understand that there's no moment like today for them to get involved. This is their state, their country. They're living with the decisions that are made far longer than I am or anyone else is. And it's an important moment for people to be a part of shaping the future. With respect to the other point you raised, what was the other question you had?
Well, it was just really about the reflection of how does Congress articulate the important issues, like, we're running out of money in Social Security. So does it make sense to increase, the limit? So if people are paying unlimited amount of money. If I'm making $400,000, I'm going to pay into that, for the good of all of our communities. I mean, there's something very appealing about efficiency in government, but it just seems like it takes a long time. So again, I'm just curious what's happening. I think that's really Trump's appeal to younger people. I think that's why he won the last election. He figured out a way to sort of take chunks of stuff that isn't the whole picture. And that's what he's doing right now, is the sledgehammer. And so it's hard to win that conversation. And I guess that's just what's been in my mind. That's all.
Yeah. No, I hear you on that front. I mean, coming out of the small business world, I'm impatient. I'm frustrated at the end of the day sometimes, where I'm looking at the metrics and trying to figure out, okay, like, how did we move the needle today? How did we make a difference? And I think government needs to operate under that sort of customer-focused mindset about how there's no wrong door and how we should make things as easy and as accessible as possible for the end user. It doesn't always happen that way. You think about some of the big legislative efforts that have been undertaken recently. Think about the Affordable Care Act, and when it was being rolled out, the website was broken for the first however many days, right? And so that didn't inspire a lot of confidence, in that new law, which now is widely accepted and is an important part of how we deliver healthcare in this country. So you're right. If you want to be on the side of making systems work and using government as the tool to improve people's lives and make things better, then you better well have a plan on how it can be efficient and how it can be broadly understood and accepted by people. And so I think that continues to be, part of the challenge of governing. And really, I think New Hampshire sets a good tone with that. You mentioned the way people work together here in New Hampshire to solve problems. The fact is, we've got a one-seat difference in terms of Democrats and Republicans in the U.S. Congress. That should provide an opportunity for people to come together and to meet somewhere in the middle to find a way forward. Unfortunately, over the last 2-year period, we saw maybe more folks on the fringes that were empowered under that calculus. But I hold out hope that we can create more of a platform for folks that are in that center of gravity, somewhere in the middle of our politics, to be, driving the train on the concerns that we hear about from our districts.
Yes, sir. Just wait for the mic.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Matthew with H&DB Corporation. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for your leadership on the T&I committee as well. We're an architecture, engineering, and construction professional firm, 7,000 people, employee-owned nationwide. And I wanted to maybe get you to expand a little bit on your comment around the trade-offs facing infrastructure and transportation funding in the years ahead, given the possibility that in order to fund the tax cut, they would perhaps either pull back funding from IIJA or perhaps rethink the future of transportation funding.
Thanks for the comments. And look, I think IIJA is on good footing moving ahead. We're in year 4 of the 5-year program. And on our committee, we actually feel incredibly optimistic about the opportunity to extend surface transportation, so funding for transit, for our roads and bridges, and do it in a way that kind of at least sustains that record level of investment that was there under the inflation, under IIJA. And so we've got a great working relationship between the chair and ranking member of our committee. We did some incredibly bipartisan things in the last Congress, the FAA bill, which sailed through our committee, Coast Guard reauthorization, a number of other things where all members are working together. And this is the largest committee in Congress. So we've already had a number of hearings on reauthorization of surface transportation. And I think that is something that is incredibly doable in this Congress, even given the political constraints and some of the funding constraints. IIJA was a multifaceted infrastructure bill that wasn't just roads and bridges. It was broadband. It was there were some energy provisions in there. It was water. And so I don't think we're going to see the same sort of omnibus package around infrastructure this time. I think it's really going to be focused on surface transportation. But we've got to do something by the end of the term. Otherwise, the funding expires, and then that leaves a big hole in New Hampshire's 10-year plan. And so we're going to be working hard to make sure we meet that deadline. And early indications are there's tremendous buy-in on both sides there. Thanks for the question.
Maybe one final question, Matthew? Do you want to wait for the mic? Or there it is.
Thank you. Thanks, Congressman. Matthew Hood from Dartmouth Health. I can't let an opportunity go to healthcare hasn't been talked about, so I'm going to raise healthcare. Specifically, you're going back to your thoughts about there's not being enough discretionary dollars to fund some of the wish lists of the administration, and I was wanting to explore that more because you sounded optimistic, right? There's not enough there. But one of the things that's scary for healthcare, which is somewhat tenuous across the country, is a lot of the things on the pay-for lists would come out of healthcare. And so I'd be really interested to hear what your thoughts are about the likelihood of success of those efforts to diminish or reduce healthcare reimbursement costs, programs that support. And my thought is that tenuous hospitals exist in red areas, rural parts of the country, and so my hope is that that provides some level of balance. And I'd be curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thanks for the question and for the way that you and your team has educated me through the years about issues pertaining to healthcare in New Hampshire. And you're absolutely right. In rural parts of the country, we've had a record number of hospitals going under over the last few years. The financial model just doesn't work. Most hospitals in New Hampshire are in a partnership or a combination or are seeking one just to be able to continue to function and maintain service. And so I've got a lot of concern around this. There are a number of things that we should be thinking about as we think about that financial picture. But you're right. Some of the items that are on the table as we think about savings that could go to finance tax cuts have to do with Medicaid, potentially, hearing things about block granting or making drastic cuts to Medicaid that would do a number of things, including reducing reimbursement, including blowing up the bipartisan deal that exists in New Hampshire around Medicaid expansion, which would be disastrous for providers in our state. And so I think that is a deeply concerning issue that I have to believe that when public pressure is applied, there are a lot of colleagues that will be responsive to that pressure, that already understand that there are huge healthcare deserts in their districts and places where their constituents are underserved. We should be working to create broader access, to make investments in telemedicine, in our community health centers, to support providers, to encourage that next generation to go into the healthcare field. Those are all areas where I hope we can find some consensus. But it's going to be tough to make progress if you're seeing a huge financial hole be made even worse for hospital systems and providers. And so we're incredibly focused on that issue. I think we'll know more as the sketch of the budget document comes out in the coming weeks around this reconciliation bill. And we would look forward to your feedback and engagement along the way.
Well, with that upbeat assessment, I just want to thank the congressman for being here, being approachable, accessible. He's now going to leave, and he's going to meet with some of the rising stars that are here today. And I have not been invited because they think I'm a falling star. But that's okay.
Your star is still ascendant.
Life goes on. Life goes on. Nothing to see. Move on. I just want to thank the congressman again. You know, he is a rising star, but he is somebody that, as I said in my early remarks, to be the most bipartisan member of the Democratic caucus in Washington says an awful lot. Because we need more people who will cross the aisle and say, that's not a bad idea. Love to work with you on that. If we had more Chris Pappas in Congress, I think we'd have more legislation passed. You know, I've often said there are people who go to Washington to make a name, and I think Chris Pappas is a man who wants to go to Washington to make a difference. And he does that each and every day for his constituents and for the entire New England congressional delegation. So we're fortunate to have him here. So thank you for all you do.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you all for being here.